At my sister's wedding, she raised her glass and called me the single mom nobody wanted right in front of my son. The worst part wasn't her joke. It was the sound of his voice, whispering. Mom, why would she say that about you? That was the moment I realized I wasn't sitting at their table. I was their entertainment. Some storms don't make you stronger. They make you stop asking for their approval. Before we dive in, where are you listening from right now? What's your story? Drop it in the comments. My name's Emily Harris. I'm 34, a single mom, and for most of my life, I've known exactly where I stand in my family, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night. I never thought getting humiliated could feel so orchestrated, like a performance with assigned seats, rehearsed lines, and me cast as the unwelcome extra. That was Samantha's wedding, my little sister, the family's golden girl. And there I was, third row back, same seat they'd give a distant cousin, wearing the only formal dress I owned, not fancy, but clean, pressed as best as I could manage between shifts. My son, Ben, sat next to me, 8 years old and beaming in a suit I had to stretch 2 paychecks for. He didn't care that his shoes were a thrift store find. He thought today was a fresh start, a way back into a family that never really knew how to make space for us. Maybe I hoped that too. Samantha floated around that place like she was born for it. She always had that glow, polished, charming, every move like a Pinterest-perfect wedding board. People didn't just like her, they adored her, especially my mother, Carolyn. They were 2 peas in a pod when it came to appearances. Samantha sneezes. Carolyn brings a silk handkerchief. I get sick, drink water. Emily, you're too dramatic. I used to think it was me, that maybe if I tried harder, dressed different, spoke softer, they'd see me as more than a cautionary tale. When I got pregnant at 25, they barely disguised the disappointment. The man who promised forever disappeared before the 3rd ultrasound. No explanations, just gone. My family's reaction, silence and a thin smile. No questions, no support, just this unspoken, well, what did you expect? But I had Ben, and holding him for the first time muted every I told you so they'd ever thrown my way. Still, I kept hoping, somewhere deep down. I thought maybe one day they'd see me, not as a statistic, not as a failure, but as someone worth being proud of. So when Samantha's wedding invite came, even though my name was spelled wrong, even though I wasn't in the bridal party, even though I knew better, I said yes, for closure, I told myself. That morning, I curled my hair in a bathroom mirror while Ben practiced his wedding smile in his too big tie. We looked like a mismatched set, but I thought maybe, just maybe we'd blend in. The venue was stunning. White roses dripping from archways, golden cutlery gleaming under soft string lights, a quartet playing some classical piece I couldn't name. It was the kind of place where people whispered about old money and past hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. When Samantha saw me, her smile was thin. "You made it," she said, like it was a surprise. Her eyes flicked to Ben. "He's getting big." No hug, no warmth, just words. And then she was gone again, back to basking in her spotlight. Carolyn didn't even pause. She swept right past me, chatting with people who really mattered. I wasn't mad, I was used to it. But Ben, he was enchanted. He said the chandelier looked like a spaceship. He whispered that Samantha looked like a princess. Seeing his face so full of wonder, I decided to stay. Even when we were seated at table 11 right by the restrooms, even when the place card misspelled my name again, we ate our salads. I wiped mousse off Ben's tie. I kept my head down, answered polite small talk with polite smiles, but the whispers, they floated in. You always hear your name when it's wrapped in a sneer. The speeches started, and that's when I felt it. That old ache, the familiar itch that told me this wasn't about family unity, This was Samantha's stage, and I was about to become the punchline. Funny how hope lingers. I still thought for a second maybe she'd surprise me. She didn't. She stood there, all diamonds and practiced grace, holding her champagne flute like a queen giving a toast. I want to thank everyone for being here. It's the happiest day of my life, surrounded by people who mean everything to me. I sat up a little straighter, tried to believe I was included in that sentence. Ben kicked his legs, grinning up at her, completely taken in. Then her smile changed, tilted, like a blade catching the light. "And of course," she said, voice sweet as poison, "I want to say something special about my big sister." I felt the air shift. "You've always been such a role model," she continued, "raising a child all on your own. No husband, no partner, just you. And, well, whoever was available to babysit." Laughter. Polite at first, then sharper. My stomach dropped, but she wasn't done. It's truly inspiring how she's managed. A single mom, unwanted by anyone, yet she still shows up. That one hit. The laughter cracked open, wider, louder, glasses clinked, heads turned, and there I was on display. Not as family, as a cautionary joke. Ben's little fingers tugged my sleeve. "Mom, why is she saying that about you?" Before I could answer, Carolyn chimed in, loud and clear, as if on cue. "Well, she's a used product, but at least she cleans up nice." Another wave of laughter, sharper, crueler. My cheeks burned, my fingers curled into the napkin in my lap, gripping it like a lifeline. I scanned the room, desperate for a friendly face. My grandfather, Frank, stared down at his plate. My cousin scrolled her phone. Even Uncle Ray, who once said I had my father's fire, wouldn't look at me. I could take their words. God knows I'd taken worse. But when I looked at Ben's face, confused, hurt, trying to understand why the people clapping moments ago were now laughing at his mom, something cracked. Not rage, not even shame. Just this cold, hard clarity. I wanted to leave, grab Ben's hand, get out before the weight of their stares buried me. But something was about to change. I just didn't know it yet. The laughter had a texture to it, thin at first, like the clink of glass, then thicker, heavier, until it settled around me like damp wool. Everyone laughed differently, some politely, others with that sharp, snorting glee that people get when they feel safe piling on. It wasn't about the joke. It was about knowing they wouldn't be the next target. Ben's fingers were still on my sleeve. His grip was small, but urgent. "Mom, why did she say that? Why are they laughing?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My throat was dry, tight, like I'd swallowed a handful of gravel. All I could do was smooth his hair, as if that simple motion could shield him from what was happening. Samantha's smile was dazzling, like a homecoming queen delivering a punchline at the loser's expense. She had them all wrapped around her finger, and I was the offering. There was no malice in her tone, not on the surface. That was what made it worse. She played it sweet, polished, like mocking me was just part of the charm package. I could hear Carolyn's voice again, slicing through the air, used product, but still polishes up nice. The table roared. A few people looked uneasy, but no one spoke up. That's how my family operates. Silence is safer. Indifference passes for civility. I wasn't surprised by my mother. Carolyn has always been the kind of woman who could serve cruelty with a smile and call it dessert. When I was 15, she told me no one would take me seriously until I learned how to close my mouth and open my legs less. I'd come to expect that flavor of love from her, but seeing my son's face crumple, seeing him confused, that hit different. I could have stood up right then, could have grabbed Ben's hand, walked out with my dignity in pieces, but at least intact. But I stayed rooted. My hands gripped the napkin like a rope, because if I left now, I'd be teaching Ben that walking away is the same as giving up, and I'd done too damn much, survived too damn long, to hand them that win. So I sat there, quietly calculating what would cost me more, standing up and making a scene, or swallowing it down for the 1,000th time. It wasn't pride keeping me in that chair. It was my son. He was watching. How I responded would shape what he thought of me, of himself, of how people should be treated when they're down, around me. The reception kept moving, as if nothing had happened. Waiters circled with trays of champagne. The quartet switched to something light and airy. Cameras flashed, capturing moments no one would want to remember later. From the head table, Samantha basked. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her job was done. She'd fed the crowd their entertainment. I scanned the room. My cousin Ellie gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind that said, "Sorry, but I'm not getting involved." Uncle Ray kept his eyes fixed on his wine glass like it had secrets only he could decipher. Even Grandpa Frank. God. Seeing him look away hurt more than anything Samantha had said. He used to call me his little lion, said I was born fierce. But age wears a man down. I could see it in his shoulders. His silence wasn't betrayal. It was surrender. And yet, I couldn't hate him for it. Ben tugged me again. His eyes were big, round, searching. "Mom, are we leaving?" he whispered. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to. But my feet stayed planted. Leaving felt like defeat. Staying felt like self-betrayal. There was no win here. My mind flipped through every time I'd kept quiet to keep the peace. Every Thanksgiving dinner spent biting my tongue. Every birthday where my absence was noted with a smirk, not a missed beat. Every moment I'd been expected to absorb their bitterness like it was my duty. Why had I thought this would be different? I thought back to the morning, to curling my hair in a cracked bathroom mirror, to watching Ben practice his smile, to convincing myself this invite was a branch of peace, not just another opportunity to remind me of my place. I felt foolish, but Ben deserved better than a mother who flinched. He deserved to see what standing your ground looked like even when it shook you. I took a breath, steadying myself. My plan was simple. Get through the rest of this night. Keep my head high. Leave with grace. That was the win. But then, something shifted. A chair scraped back from the head table. Not mine. Not Samantha's. Daniel. Samantha's fiancé. His movements were slow, deliberate, no forced smile, no attempt to lighten the mood. Just this heavy stillness, like he was holding something back. The room reacted before he spoke. Conversations hiccuped. Silverware paused mid-air. Even Carolyn's face twitched the tiniest crack in her porcelain composure. Daniel's eyes weren't on Samantha. They weren't on the guests. They were on me. And something in that look made the entire room hold its breath. He walked forward. Each step sounded louder than it should have in a room filled with over 100 people. He reached for the microphone with a calmness that was surgical. No fanfare, no apology, just took it. Samantha tried to laugh, tried to smooth over the tension with a little wave of her hand. "Oh, Dan, I think we've had enough speeches." He didn't look at her. His voice cut through the air, even though he wasn't shouting. "I disagree." 3 words. And just like that, the tone of the night shifted. He didn't speak fast. He wasn't angry, not in the raised voice, red-in-the-face way, but his words carried weight, a quiet, deliberate weight. I've spent the past year hearing about family, about loyalty, appearances, traditions, and tonight, I've seen exactly what that means. You could hear a pin drop. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He just laid it out, stone by stone. To mock a woman for raising a child alone isn't humor, it's cowardice. To dress it up as tradition is even worse. People shifted in their chairs. Samantha's smile was frozen, lips tight. Carolyn looked like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the right angle. But Daniel wasn't finished. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't stand up here and demand recognition. She showed up, quietly, for her sister, for her family. And that was repaid with mockery. His gaze never wavered from mine. Ben was gripping my hand now, holding it with both of his. His eyes were wide. But this time, there was no confusion, just this dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, someone was standing up for us. Daniel looked back at the crowd. I won't pretend this is okay. I won't stay silent to keep up appearances, because if this is what family looks like, then I need to reconsider the family I'm marrying into. The words hung there, heavy, final. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revealing, a mirror held up to every person in that room. Samantha looked like her dress weighed 100 pounds. Her sparkle dulled. Carolyn's mouth was a thin, furious line. Me, I was still holding Ben's hand, still breathing, still here. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't the one who felt small. Daniel set the microphone down, walked straight past Samantha, and left the hall without another word. No one moved. No music resumed. No polite applause. Just the soft hum of air vents and the slow, inevitable unraveling of a night that was supposed to be perfect. For them. Not for me. But as I looked at Ben, at his proud, amazed little face, I realized something. Maybe tonight wasn't a loss after all. For a few seconds after Daniel walked out, it was like the whole room forgot how to breathe. Nobody moved. Nobody clapped. Even the waitstaff seemed to pause mid-step, unsure whether to keep serving drinks or duck for cover. That's the thing about families like mine. They know how to hurt you in plain sight. They know how to wrap cruelty in a smile, in a toast, in a well-timed joke. But when someone calls it out, really calls it out, it's like cutting the power at a Broadway show. The set's still there, but the illusion's dead. And there I was, still sitting at table 11 clutching Ben's hand, watching the fallout unfold. Samantha was frozen at the head table. For once, she had no comeback, no quip. Her face, always perfectly arranged, looked brittle now, like if someone tapped her, she might crack. Carolyn. Though she wasn't going down without a fight. Her chair scraped back with that high, grating sound only expensive chairs make on marble floors. She stood up, shoulders squared, voice sharp. Well, that was uncalled for, she snapped. Ungrateful boy. He embarrassed you. Samantha, in front of everyone. Just like your sister. Selfish. Always has been. But this time, her words didn't hit the way she wanted them to. The room didn't rally to her defense. There were no nods of agreement, no sympathetic murmurs, just more of that thick, uncomfortable silence. And for once, I didn't feel the need to shrink under her voice. That realization hit me harder than anything Samantha said earlier. For years, Carolyn's disapproval had been this weight I carried everywhere. Holidays, birthdays, school, plays, all of it shadowed by the knowledge that I'd fallen short of whatever invisible standard she held. But in that moment, standing there with her words falling flat, I saw her for what she was, a woman whose power only worked if everyone agreed to pretend it was real. And suddenly, I was done pretending. I stood up slowly, not to make a scene, not to deliver some grand speech, just to leave. Ben looked up at me, his little fingers still holding tight to mine. Are we going home now, Mom? He asked quietly. Yes, baby, we are. As I turned toward the exit, something strange happened. The crowd parted. Not dramatically. Not in some movie slow motion kind of way. Just quietly, awkwardly, as if none of them could quite meet my eyes. Some looked at their phones. Others fiddled with their napkins. A few whispered, but no one stopped me. No one tried to fix it. No one tried to smooth it over. They just let me walk. Halfway to the door, I heard my name. Soft, uncertain. Emily. I turned. It was Grandpa Frank. He looked old in a way that hurt to see, his shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed with red. He took a shaky step toward me, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said. I should have stopped it. Years ago, for a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. But I nodded, small, enough. I didn't hate him. His silence wasn't cruelty. It was fear. The same fear that kept everyone else glued to their seats tonight. But me, I wasn't carrying their guilt anymore. Ben tugged my hand gently, grounding me. We stepped outside into the cool evening air. The reception hall's heavy doors shut behind us with a muted thud. For the first time that night, I could breathe. Ben looked up at me. "Is the wedding over?" I smiled. A real one this time. "Yeah, buddy. I think it ended exactly how it was supposed to." We walked to the car in comfortable silence. The fairy lights strung across the venue flickered behind us, but none of their glow touched me. That was fine. I didn't need it. As I buckled Ben into his seat, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but I was at the wedding. What Daniel did, it was brave. You deserved better. Just thought you should hear that from someone." I stared at the screen for a second, then slipped the phone into my pocket. On the drive home, Ben hummed softly, tapping his fingers on the window. No questions, no heavy talks, just the quiet rhythm of tires on pavement and my son's small, steady heartbeat beside me. I didn't know what would come next, whether Samantha and Daniel would call off the wedding officially, whether Carolyn would launch some smear campaign to spin the night as my fault, but none of it seemed to matter, not anymore. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight. The next morning, my phone exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from cousins, from old family friends, even from people I hadn't seen since high school. Turns out, someone had recorded Daniel's speech. It was all over Facebook, over 50,000 views and climbing. The comments were a flood of support. "This man's a hero. She deserved better." I'm crying watching this. Every single mom's been there. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, feeling still, like something inside me had finally unclenched. That week, Samantha tried to spin it, said Daniel overreacted, called it a misunderstanding, blamed the internet for blowing it out of proportion. But it didn't stick because the truth had already landed, and no one was laughing anymore. A few days later, a small bouquet of wildflowers showed up at my door. No note, just a tiny card that said, "To the Lioness." I didn't need to guess who it was from. The wedding didn't happen. Officially, it was called off mutually, though no statements were made. Samantha scrubbed the photos from her social media. Carolyn stayed quiet. The family did what they do, best pretended it never happened. But I didn't need their apologies. I'd found something better, myself. In the quiet that followed, life went back to its regular rhythm: work, school drop-offs, pancakes on Sundays. But it felt different, lighter. Not because my circumstances changed, but because I did. And Ben, he carried himself taller too. One night, while brushing his teeth, he looked up at me in the mirror. "Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Samantha said?" I paused. Meeting his reflection, "No, baby, Not anymore. Why he shrugged, toothpaste foam on his chin. Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight. That line stuck with me. Because he was right. I hadn't fought. I hadn't screamed or shouted or tried to claw my way into respect. I had simply stood up, held my son's hand, and walked away. Daniel had done the shouting, and the room, the family they had to sit with, what they'd done. I realized then sometimes dignity isn't loud. Sometimes it's just not flinching. And that was a win no one could take from me. It's funny how quiet the fallout can be. No big family meeting, no dramatic blow-ups, just a series of small, telling silences. A week after the wedding, that wasn't. Samantha's engagement officially evaporated. No statements, no explanations. The pictures vanished from her feed like they'd never existed. A few mutual friends whispered about how they just weren't compatible after all. But anyone who saw Daniel's speech knew the truth. He didn't dump her. He peeled back the veneer. The rest collapsed on its own. Carolyn, of course, couldn't let it go. She called me once, not to apologize, no. Her voice was clipped, controlled, as always. I hope you're happy with yourself. Emily, you embarrassed this family. You couldn't just let a harmless joke go. Could you? Always so sensitive. Always playing the victim. It was almost impressive how she could twist a blade and still sound polite. But this time, it didn't land. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was done. I let her finish, let her run out of venom. Then, for the first time in my life, I said it plainly, I'm not your scapegoat anymore. No screaming, no righteous speech. Just that. I hung up, clean, simple, final. And it was like unclipping a weight I hadn't realized I was still dragging. The thing is, my life didn't suddenly transform. I still worked 2 jobs. I still had nights where I'd collapse into bed after midnight, only to be up at dawn packing Ben's lunch. My little apartment didn't get bigger. The bills didn't shrink. But I wasn't shrinking anymore. There was a shift inside me. Subtle, but real. I stopped apologizing for existing, stopped deflecting compliments, stopped explaining why I was tired, or why I wasn't at family gatherings, or why I didn't want to make peace on their terms. And Ben, he noticed. He started asking questions, smart ones. Mom, why do people make fun of things they don't understand? Why do grown-ups laugh when someone's being hurt? Hard questions, but the kind worth asking. One night, as I was folding laundry, he sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with his action figures. Out of nowhere, he said, I think Mr. Daniel's like Captain America. Yeah, I smiled. How so? Because he stands up for people, even when it's scary. I couldn't argue with that. In his world, heroes were the ones who spoke up, and thanks to Daniel, he'd seen that in real life. That moment, more than anything, made me grateful I hadn't walked out of that wedding in silence. The internet didn't forget either. The video of Daniel's speech kept circulating. Comments poured in from strangers, single moms, daughters, even grown men who admitted they'd once stayed quiet in rooms like that and regretted it. One comment stuck with me. He didn't give her dignity. She already had it. He just refused to let people pretend otherwise. I kept that one. Samantha, predictably, tried to pivot, claimed people were being too sensitive, that family roasts were a tradition. She even hinted that Daniel wasn't strong enough to handle real life. But the tide had turned. No one was buying it. She wasn't the wounded party this time, and no amount of curated Instagram posts could reset that. I won't pretend I didn't feel a small, quiet satisfaction watching the narrative slip out of her control. But it wasn't revenge. It was relief. A door had closed, and I didn't want back in. One afternoon, maybe a month later, a small envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a simple card. On the front, a watercolor of a lioness. Inside, Just 2 words. Still proud, no signature. But I didn't need one. Grandpa Frank had never been a man of many words. But when he chose them, they stuck. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. It was something better. A recognition. That night, after Ben was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table, holding that card, thinking about how easy it is to carry shame that was never yours to hold, how families pass it down like heirlooms, how silence feeds it. But Daniel had cut through that, not with anger, not with spectacle, with truth, simple, unvarnished. And for the first time, I'd allowed myself to believe it, that I was not less, not broken, not some used product they could write off. I was a mother, a survivor, a woman who had built a life out of the pieces others discarded. And I was done asking for permission to stand tall. Months passed, seasons changed, life settled into its usual rhythm, but I moved through it differently now. I didn't hide at school events. I didn't avoid the mirror. I didn't shrink in grocery store aisles when I ran into old family friends. And Ben Sweet, observant Ben, watched it all. One night, as we brushed our teeth side by side, he glanced up at me in the mirror. "Mom, do you think Aunt Samantha is still mad?" I smiled, rinsing my toothbrush. "Maybe. But that's not our problem, is it?" He shook his head, foam on his chin. "I don't think it matters. You already won, simple, direct, no dramatics. That kid has always seen through the noise." Because that's what it was, noise. The gossip, the whispers, the digs masked as jokes. None of it ever defined me. I'd just been tricked into thinking it did. The real win wasn't Daniel's speech, though I'll forever be grateful for it. It was me, standing up, holding my son's hand, and walking out of that room without flinching. Quiet defiance, dignity, once reclaimed, is something no one can take from you again. So, no. I didn't get the fairy tale wedding moment. I didn't cry under a canopy of lights or dance with my family to a sappy love song. But I left with something better. I left with my son beside me, my head high. And a lesson that will outlive any centerpiece or wedding photo, that being strong isn't about being loud. Sometimes it's just about refusing to be small. To anyone out there who's ever been made to feel less, who's been laughed at, dismissed, or sidelined by the very people who should have lifted you up, hear me when I say this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't need to perform strength for the people who never cared to see it in the first place. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stand up, take your child's hand, and walk out of the room with your dignity intact. And you don't need their applause, because the right people, they'll see you, just like Daniel did. And maybe, more importantly, so will you.